Sons of Scotland, I am William Wallace.
William Wallace is 7 feet tall.
Yes, I've heard. He kills men by the hundred. And if he were here, he'd consume the English with fireballs from his eyes and bolts of lightning from his arse. I am William Wallace. And I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do with that freedom? Will you fight?
Fight against that? No! We will run!
And we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
That, of course, is one of the greatest scenes from one of the greatest movies ever. I've often said, how many movies can be summed up in a single word, especially a word so powerful, a word that's created entire civilizations? Freedom. That's the genius of that film. Come on in, gang. Come on in, one and all. It is I, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here for our live stream Monday. We got a special one for you tonight. Normally we stream for about, 20 minutes or so, and then we go to our private backstage virtual studio reserved only for our Insiders Club members. Tonight, we're staying the whole time online with you on YouTube. We're on Rumble. We're on Twitter. And apparently, we're on Instagram tonight. This is our first time live on Instagram. You are invited to listen in on our virtual live Q&A, which we normally do only with our Insiders Club members each Monday evening. But we're staying live tonight on YouTube and Rumble and Twitter and all our social media channels. And that's because I am feeling particularly inspired tonight, as you could see there. I am feeling, but we of course got more polling that just came out this afternoon that shows the Democrats are they're in a free fall with Biden. I mean, it's not just the fact that the lawfare, the weaponized legalism, the intentional banana republic-like interferences in our free and fair election. It's not just the fact that all of that isn't working. It's not just that it's not working, gang. It is now officially backfiring. Ever since this trial started, this pathetic sham trial in New York City that CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times are actually trying to pass off as a legitimate trial. Ever since that joke, that kangaroo court carnival joke started, Trump's polls have been surging. And it's not just that. Not only are Trump's polls surging, Biden's polls are at the same time literally plummeting across the board. Head-to-head, five-way race, approval rating, how he's handling the economy, how he's handling inflation, how he's handling the southern border, violent crime, foreign policy. It's an utter polling disaster across the board. So I am feeling very, very inspired tonight. But that's not the real reason for my inspiration. The real reason is found in that movie clip we just saw together, that we just celebrated together. I'm sorry. I want to see it again. I totally. I told you. I just love the scene. Who wants to see that scene again? Put it in the chat. Who wants to see that amazing scene? It never gets old. For I have watched that scene hundreds of times. I've actually done a whole lecture on it. It never gets old. I can watch it again and again. It's the very definition of a perfect cinematographic scene. Josh, play it again, man. Do it again.
Of Scotland, I am William Wallace.
William Wallace is 7 feet tall.
Yes, I've heard. He kills men by the hundred. And if he were here, he'd consume the English with fireballs from his eyes and bolts of lightning from his arse. I am William Wallace. And I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do at freedom? Will you fight?
Against that? No! We will run!
And we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
The reason why I love that scene so much is because it's one of the most amazing examples of the transformative power of a hero. When a hero enters our lives, he has the unique transformative power to turn our fear into fight, to transfigure our cowering into courage. And that transformative power is found, I believe, in the hero's unique ability to awaken within us a reality that only the hero can see. That's part of what makes him or her a hero, right? Did you notice the radical contrast between what William Wallace saw and what everyone else saw, right? So how did the Scots see themselves? How did they see themselves? Again, this is such a brilliant scene because you can tell how they saw themselves. If there was a mirror brought to them, they saw themselves precisely the way the English saw them as they were taunting them and laughing at them. They saw themselves as a bunch of ragtag farmers and goat herders who had the gall to think that they could stand toe-to-toe with what was then the world superpower, the polished, professional army of the English. The Scots believed they were unworthy. They believed that they were what the rest of the world saw. And what they needed was a hero. What they needed is someone who could come into their lives and see them for who they really were. That's why I love this scene so much. I mean, as the men are turning back to go back to their farms and their their mud huts. William Wallace rides up and cries out, "Sons of Scotland, I am William Wallace." And of course, that was important because William Wallace's reputation preceded him. As you can see, he was already known throughout the land as being a defender of the Scottish people. He was a legend. He was 7 feet tall. He was undefeatable and all that sort of stuff. And William Wallace is like, "Well, I'm not that." Well, he said that in his own colorful way, but I am William Wallace, he said, "and my allegiance is to Scotland. That's who I am. And when I look out at all of you, do you know what I see?" Now, seriously, stop a minute there. Can you imagine what he could have said at that moment? Can you imagine what he could have said? "I'm William Wallace, the defender of Scotland, and this has got to be the sorriest excuse for an army I've ever seen. What were you guys thinking? The English are going to have you for breakfast." That's not what he said. It's not what he said. Hear me. It's not what he said because that is not what he saw. What did he see? "I am William Wallace, and I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny." That's the beauty of the scene. That line right there. In the midst of all the taunting, in the midst of all of the smears that were coming from afar from the English army, he stood there before them and he reminded them who they really are. He reminded them of their true identity. "You are a whole army of my countrymen, men I am proud to fight alongside of as we stand together here in defiance of tyranny." And then he said one of my favorite lines of all time. He said, "You have come here as free men, and free men you are. Fundamentally, you are not farmers. That's not who you are. I know that's what you do. That's not who you are. You're not farmers. You're not goat herders. You're not tinkers. You're not a joke. You're not Neanderthals. You're not deplorables. You are free men. And free men will not be ruled." And then he asked a profound question. Now that we've established who you are, right? So what are you going to do? What will you do with that freedom? Will you fight? You see, he's not just talking about a negative freedom, a freedom from tyranny. This is, again, what makes it seem so brilliant. Freedom is twofold. Classically, freedom has always been understood as twofold. There are two freedoms. There's the freedom from what we call negative freedom, a freedom from coercion, a freedom from tyranny. But there's also a freedom for. That's what's called a positive freedom. You've been given that freedom as a gift by God to realize who you really are. What will you do with that freedom? Will you fight for it? And in the ancient world, he's also drawing from the notion of the 4 virtues, right? All men were expected to cultivate 4 virtues. Our founding fathers believed this. The 4 classical virtues are wisdom, moderation, justice, and courage. Wisdom, moderation, justice, and courage. Which one's the most important? Who knows? Put it in the chat, right? We've talked about this before. Which one's the most important? Yes, it's courage. Courage. Because without courage, you don't have the fortitude to fight for the other virtues. Without courage, you don't have the fortitude to fight for the other virtues. I gotta read this again. I love this. Like I said, I am so inspired tonight. You are inspiring me here. This is why I love the scene from The Lord of the Rings at the end of the 2 towers. This is when Frodo, who's traveling through the ancient and magical Middle Earth to get rid of an evil ring, right, in the fires of Mount Mordor, or else Sauron, the evil spirit of Mordor, is going to take over the whole of Middle Earth. Frodo literally has the entire weight of Middle Earth world on his shoulders, right? And as he's traveling the long way to destroy the ring, he faces all kinds of countless life-threatening adversities, and he just begins to weep, and he just begins to fall into despair. And he looks at Samwise Gamgee, his companion, and he just says, "I can't do this, Sam. I just can't do this." And here's what Sam says to him. "I know, Mr. Frodo, I know it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. But it's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered, full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened?" You ever feel that? It's one of the most common questions I get. Can we ever go back? Can we ever restore the nation that we love when so much bad has happened? But listen to Sam. "But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it will shine out all the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, going back home. Run and you'll live. Only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. And Frodo looks at him. "What are we holding on to, Sam?" And Sam leans forward and looks directly into his eyes. "That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." Gang, I am inspired tonight because you have been my Samwise Gamgee. You have been my William Wallace. You have transformed my despondency into defiance. You've turned my fear into fight. You've turned my cowardice into courage. You are why I am so inspired tonight. You have come to my rescue. Better, you have come to our rescue. I shared with you all last week that I so much related to these Scots or to Frodo because I had to face my own Mordor. I had to face my own superpower enemy, as it were. Many of you know I announced it last week. YouTube has unfortunately demonetized our channel for a second straight time in a row. We complied with everything they required of us in the first demonetization. And unfortunately, we went above and beyond. And unfortunately, when we reapplied, they moved the goalposts. They came up with an entirely new infraction to slap us with to keep us completely demonetized for the foreseeable future. We don't even have super chats. According to Google and YouTube, our channel features, quote, harmful content. Our videos are now deemed harmful to YouTube's audience. Now, in fairness, I do mean this very sincerely, it could be an overzealous AI. That's not necessarily a person behind that. It could be an overzealous AI. I've read articles on that. It could be pressure from the deep state, like we saw with the Twitter files. It's interesting this is happening now, right now, as the election season is starting to heat up. Whatever's actually going on behind the scenes, The latest update over the weekends, we had another development. We've been informed that our AdSense account is now being deactivated. And it's because our AdSense account hasn't had any activity in the last 5 months. They're going to deactivate it. Now, of course, we haven't had any activity because they demonetized us. So it's just pouring salt on the wound. So I shared with you guys all together, this is costing us over $1 million. It's costing us over $1 million freaking dollars that we use to pay our support staff. We got 30 plus people who work behind the scenes to serve you, to bless you each and every single day, the best video content and commentary possible. And I admitted to you, this is not something I'm used to. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm an academic. I spent my whole adult life in libraries and lecture halls. I don't know how to process losing $1 million freaking dollars. And so it's true. I despaired. My first thought a few weeks back when I found out about this was to just shut this whole thing down, to be honest with you, and just go back into academia. I just thought about going back to the classroom and start teaching again. You know, in short, I just despaired. I'm ashamed to say, but I was not, your patriot professor was not William Wallace. I was not Braveheart. I was more akin to those cowardly, ragtag, disheveled Scotsmen ready to flee from these tech tyrants and just run back and hide behind my desk in my old classroom. And the more I think about it, this is what makes what big tech tyranny does so vile and pernicious, because in the end, they're not canceling me, they're canceling us. They're trying to cancel us, literally, our relationship with one another, canceling what we built together. They deliberately want to separate us from each other so that we despair. That's what makes it so frankly demonic. They want us to feel alone, and they want us to despair. And just when I was ready to turn and run, you came. Just when I was ready to cower and leave, you happened. You came and you transformed me. I told you about how we were ready for this big tech canceling. Over the last several months, we have been busy preparing for a moment precisely like this. That's why I have those 30 plus staff members. Last week, we unveiled our brand new Turley Talks app, our very own platform that can never, ever be canceled. It's a beautiful personal app that you've been downloading. If you have yet to do it, you could download it completely free, as well as join one of our levels of support. If you're so inclined, just click on the link below, go to fight.turleytalks.com to make an account and download the app. Now, if you've already signed up, you know this, but for those of you who are signing up for this during this show, when you make an account, check your inbox for a very special email. You're going to get to sign, you're going to be invited to sign our Declaration of Restoration. That's the petition to big tech that you can sign. You can put your name on it. That informs these tech tyrants that a new day is dawn. They no longer control us. We're taking our nation back with this independent platform, virtual platform that we have. Gang, you could see the numbers. I am absolutely ecstatic to announce we're almost at 10,000 downloads. 10,000. And we've had over 1,000 of you signed our Declaration of Restoration petition. If you want, I'll read it for you tonight. The Declaration of Restoration has over 1,000 signatures on it. And we've had hundreds of you sign up for one of the levels of support to help us out financially during this time. You have come to our rescue. You have rescued this channel. You have rescued this channel, and you have transformed my cowardliness into courage. You have made me a courageous patriot. And I thank each and every single one of you from the bottom of my heart for what you have done, not just for me, for us. So thank you 1,000 times. Plus, because of you, I don't have to go back to a woke university. That would have been torture. Oh my gosh. Heck, I don't think they would even hire me at this point. Well, thanks to you, I don't have to worry about that. So you are my heroes, gang. You have inspired me like nothing else. Every single one of you. And from the bottom of my heart, I can't thank you enough for what you've done to rescue us. All right, let's talk about the news today, because we do have some pretty astonishing developments going on. Remember, it's the same as always. Because our super chats have been disabled, all you have to do is click on the link below or go to fight.turleytalks.com. Join any tier of support. You'll automatically be enrolled in our Insiders Club. And that's how you can ask me your questions. You can ask your questions on our virtual platform that you'll be invited to, our backstage platform, as it were, and I'll answer them tonight, as always. All right, gang. So we are beginning to see the lawfare of the Democrats literally boomerang on them. And it's not good if you are a Biden supporter. Take a look at this now. This is a new Harvard-Harris poll. It just dropped today. 57% of the public believes that the Democrats are deliberately trying to weaponize the legal system in order to take out their political opponent, Donald Trump. 57%. That is gigantic. It's actually the polar opposite of what the legacy media has been trying to foment among the wider population. The George Stephanopoulos of the legacy media, who ask their guests every single time, how could you even entertain the thought of voting for a convicted felon? You would do that? You would vote for president, a convicted felon? What kind of morally degenerate person are you to do such a thing? Now, of course, the answer is the only moral degeneracy, Steffi, is you. The only moral degeneracy that I see is a Democrat media tag team that's actively trying to imprison their mutual political opponent, their adversary. That's the moral degeneracy here. Now, this same Harvard-Harris poll found as well that were Trump convicted of any of the crimes he's being tried for, it basically would not hurt him. He'd be tied with Biden 50-50, which again is remarkable. It's a remarkable change from what the polls were saying just a couple of weeks ago. They used to say, like when you would ask this question, would you vote for Trump if you were convicted of a felony? And he'd lose like 7 to 9 points, right? But that's, what you have to understand, though. What you have to understand is that's a result of response bias. When the respondent purposely gives the answer he or she thinks the pollster is looking for because of a concern of being judged or whatever, right? So when a person is, would you still consider voting for Trump, even if he's convicted of a felony? Right. And they're like, oh, no, I would never do that. That's called a response bias. It looks like the response biases are more or less gone. People are now pissed. They're pissed that Trump is being put through this. And so they have no problem looking at the pollster and say, hell yeah. If anything, I'm more likely to vote for him, right? And again, this correlates with Trafalgar's polling data. Trafalgar polling, they found that 79% of Americans, 8 in 10, believe that we live in a two-tier justice system that protects the rich and the powerful at the expense of average citizens. So people are pissed. They're absolutely pissed. And if anything, they are more inclined to vote for Trump than less inclined. I still think you have response bias in those answers, but not as much. Now, to make matters even worse, we now have a brand new poll that shows that 64% of the public believes that Biden's cognitive decline has gotten worse. I wonder why. They call it public lapses. Are President Biden's public lapses, if any, more or less frequent these days? If any? Why would you think that? You lying down, dog-faced ponytail? Pause. Right. Right. Why would you think that? I'm going to go drop down. I'm going to challenge you to push up that pause. Now, all of this is coming on top of the CNN poll that dropped yesterday, which absolutely, I'm having my Biden moment. It was absolutely devastating for Biden. Trump has taken his largest lead yet in CNN's polling. Head to head, Trump is beating Biden by 6 points, 49 to 43. And then when you divide it up in a 5-way race, so Cornel West and RFK and Jill Stein and so forth, it's Trump by 9. I mean, it's this is a national poll. It's absolutely astonishing, but it's the crosstabs that are really devastating here. Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, was talking about this on his live stream today, which was really good. 55% of respondents, 55% of respondents believe Trump's presidency was a success, whereas only 39% believe the same for Biden. That is a 16-point difference between these two. 55% that believe that Trump was a success, a better president than Biden, right? 61% believe Biden is a failure. 61%. Now, here's why this is such a disaster. There is no way, ultimately, going into November, there is no way that 55% is going to walk into a voting booth or send in a ballot thinking that Trump is by far the better president, but then turn around and vote for Biden. There will be a small number, yes, but it's single digits within the aggregate, within that 55%, single digits. It's just not going to happen. There is no way that 55% thinks Trump is the better president and then is going to go in and vote for Biden. There's just that kind of cognitive dissonance does not exist in mass. Just to bring this home, of that 55%, 51% of independents said that Trump's presidency was successful, whereas only 37% see Biden's presidency as successful. Independents overwhelmingly side with Trump. Gang, to put this bluntly, I mean, this is politically fatal. I mean, just imagine if this were the other way around. Again, we talked about this in our first video today. This is the first election. This is a very unusual election. This is the first election where everyone already has a solid opinion of both candidates. Everyone has a solid opinion of both candidates. That's the advantage of running Trump, because he's the hybrid candidate, right? He's part incumbent, part candidate. This is the advantage every incumbent, by the way, has in every election. Everybody knows him. He doesn't have to sell you. All he has to do is make the challenger look worse than him, which incumbents normally are successful in doing. Dukakis had a 30-point lead over Bush Sr. this time in their election season because nobody knew him. Nobody knew him, and nobody really cared for Bush Sr., but nobody knew him. The moment Bush Sr., who of course wasn't really an incumbent, but he was vice president, but the moment Bush Sr. exposed Dukakis for who he really is, he crashed and burned. Dukakis crashed and burned. That's not happening to Trump. Nothing Biden does can affect what people already feel and believe about Trump. Everyone has an opinion of him. Good, bad, ugly, it doesn't matter. And so this is why the polls have been relatively stable now for months. Have you noticed that? It's so interesting. It's now very clear that most people, 55%, believe that Trump was the better president. They favor Trump over Biden by 16 points. And that's being reflected in relatively stable polling. Not all of those 55 have obviously made up their mind, but it's very hard to see how they're going to vote for Biden when they think Trump is the better president. So these polls have been very, very stable, almost calcified in a sense. And for months, they've shown Trump leading Biden, and most particularly in swing states. And we just simply never saw that in 2016 or in 2020. Now, that's not to suggest that those numbers, that those polls aren't going to tighten a bit more before we get to November, right? Because we are a very divided country. But there's nothing to suggest that the margin of difference is going to change that much. There's nothing to suggest we're going to see a flip like we did with George Bush Sr. and Dukakis, like in this 30-point swing. There's nothing to suggest that. There's no economic. There's nothing we don't know about either one of these candidates. There's no economic forecast. There's nothing happening to change the situation at the southern border. There's no indication that Russia's suddenly going to surrender, or that Israel Hamas conflict is going to be resolved anytime soon. That's why, that's why a lot of people are really worried about a black swan event. They're really worried about some event that just nobody saw that absolutely causes catastrophe in a desperate bid to try to change things. But again, people already know how Trump and Biden would respond to those things. There's no mystery between the two. So there's, outside of just an incredibly cataclysmic black swan event, there's literally nothing that we can expect to change over the next 6 months. It's going to radically affect these numbers. At this point, we can say, this is exactly what Rich Barris was arguing this morning. At this point, we can safely assume that voters are going to mail in their ballots, or they're going to go to the polls on election day, largely seeing Trump's presidency as a far more of a success than Biden's. They're going to see Trump as the successful president, the better president, and they're going to see Biden really as an abject failure. To make it even worse for Biden, take a look at this stat. You'll like this. This is from Quantum Polls. They had this analysis here. Again, Rich was talking about this earlier. But in 11 of the last 16 elections, so what we're going back, 64 years or so, 11 of the last 16 elections, the polls during this period of the election season, so the period of the polls in the mid-spring to early summer, rightly predicted the eventual winner. In other words, whoever was in the lead this time in the election cycle, generally, in 11 of the last 16 elections, generally went on to win the general election. The Bush-Dukakis election, of course, was one of those exceptions, as was 2016 when Trump shocked Hillary. But there's only a few of those elections. 16 is going back nearly 70 years. I think it's 64 years. And so what we've seen here is a relatively reliable indicator for who's going to win in November, whoever is in the lead right now. Now, I don't know if we can go with right side broadcasting. Let's see, what do we have here? You've got the wrong one up there. Right side broadcasting one. If you don't have it, it's fine. Right side broadcasting is predicting a Reagan-like style landslide. I think that's a little too optimistic. I don't think that's possible in our radically sort of Civil War driven partisan era. Because I think our country is basically splitting apart. It's literally tribalizing. Now, at this point, I don't see a formal secession. Maybe if Texas is successful. There you go. I don't see a formal secession. But I think every presidential election is our way to express not just our disagreement with the other side, but our very real, genuine disgust. Okay. Blue states and red states basically hate each other. So I don't see, Biden could be comatose and California's going to vote for him. Right. I mean, there's just no way around it. Illinois is going to, because LA and Chicago are going to vote for him. But it does look like we are seeing something akin to about a 312 electoral vote victory at this point, which would be even bigger than what Trump got in 2016. So we'll have to see if overcoming the fraud, the margin of fraud, is baked into these numbers, into these leads. When you factor in the fact that Trump normally overperforms, he did this both in 2016 and 2020. He normally overperforms by about 3 points. Biden underperformed by about 3 points in 2020. If you factor that 6-point spread in there, that should be more than enough. Given all these already pretty sizable leads, that should be more than enough to overcome the margin of fraud. We'll have to see. Obviously, we're going to have to do everything we possibly can to overwhelm that fraud and minimize it from in our own sphere and our own local polling by volunteering at our own local election polls and the like, and being very involved with early vote action, eva.org, to make sure we have a massive mail-in ballot, especially a ballot harvesting plan. We've talked about that because our voter is low propensity, not high propensity anymore. Low propensity voters. They tend to be blue collar voters, rural voters who are actually not. They're not likely to vote. They didn't vote in 2020. They didn't vote in 2022. They're not likely to come out and vote because they don't give a rip about DC. But were they to come out and vote, we have all the stats show they would overwhelmingly support Trump. So we've got to make sure that our mail-in ballot initiative is directed towards them in the key swing states. If it is, we stay in parity with the Democrats for the early mail-in votes, and then we crush them on election day, because Republicans do still have very high propensity voters that come out in mass on election day, a +2, +3 Republican electorate. So there you go. Over to you, gang. My heroes, my Bravehearts, my Samwise Gamgee. We are approaching 10,000 downloads. Help us do that. That's so cool. Very good. Let's see what questions you have. Remember, it's the same as always, because our super chats have been disabled. Just click on the link below, join any tier of support, and you'll automatically be enrolled in our Insiders Club. And that's how you can ask me your questions. You can ask your questions on our virtual platform, and I'll answer them here tonight. Our first one comes from Paul. Dear, good to see you, Paul. As we know, Trump had a meeting with DeSantis over the weekend. I don't want DeSantis as Trump's VP pick for 2 reasons. His failed campaign was funded in part by the Bush family, which makes me question his integrity. I don't believe he's got the energy or charisma. And number 2, I don't believe he's got the energy or charisma to get elected after Trump and carry MAGA forward. Thoughts? Okay, well, those are 2 very, very valid points. And I don't think he's going to be the VP. I did not get that sense. I actually just have that up on my Twitter feed here. Trump took to Truth Social. I'm very happy to have the full and enthusiastic support of Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. We had a great meeting yesterday, arranged by mutual friend Steve Wickoff. He's a big donor. Beautiful Shell Bay Club in Hollywood, Florida, at his beautiful Shell Bay Club. The conversation mostly concerned how we would work closely together to make America great again. Also discussed was the future of Florida, which is fantastic. I greatly appreciate Ron's support in taking back our country from the worst president in the history of the United States. November 5th is a big day. That just, when all said and done, that sounds like they're locking money together. DeSantis is very good at raising money, and he does have some really high-powered, high-level donors. And it sounds like they're coming now into Trump's camp. Remember, Trump's been outspent 6-1. That's what makes these polls so astonishing. They're not being affected by money. It's well, again, Hillary did the same thing. She outspent Trump 2-1, if I recall, in 2016. And I think, from what I understand, Trump wants to create a massive war chest and then just go ape in the last 3 or 4 months and just flood the airways with all the kinds of anti-Biden ads. So I don't think you have to worry about it, but I think your reasons are correct. I think he was way too rhino. He basically had the never Trump vote behind him. And now the irony is they're having to align with Trump, and some of them are not happy about it. But hey, what are you going to do? It's, he's the Godzilla of politics. And I agree with you. His campaign was a disaster. Presidential campaign was an absolute disaster. And I would be worried about carrying MAGA forward with a Ron DeSantis candidacy. Yeah. So we'll see. Again, 4 years is a long time for him to redeem himself. So good, Paul. Very good. Vlad the Impaler. My man, you talk about the rise of the civilization state, but how is that going to be possible when native Western cultures are being displaced by Africans, animist and pagan beliefs, and Muslims? Not everyone invading the West has the Judeo-Christian ethic. Oh yeah. No, I'm not. So the civilization state is happening now. In scholars see it in Russia, China, definitely China. Zhang Weiwei's book on China as a civilization state is excellent. Same with Jake Martin. India as the Hindu civilization state. Turkey is definitely trying to position itself as a civilization state. Egypt is trying to position itself as the oldest civilization state by going back to its pharaonic roots and the like. Some are arguing that Saudi Arabia is functioning very much as a civilization state for Sunni Muslims around the world, and then Iran as a Shiite civilization state for Shiite Muslims, about 15% of the Muslim population. Now, Emmanuel Macron has tried to argue that Europe itself is a civilization state. So he's trying to rethink the European Union in civilizational terms, even though it's a globalist structure. And globalism is not so much a civilization as much as it's a system, a political, economic system of protocols. And then I think Christian nationalists here in the United States are trying to reawaken the notion of the United States as a kind of civilization state. There was a time I didn't think, again, the civilization state scholarship is very young. It's only about 4 years old. So there were many who argued at the beginning that America cannot be a civilization state because it's not old enough. But there are others who argue it doesn't matter. If you're going back to your religious core, if you're going back to, as you're rightly pointing out, going back to your in this case, Judeo-Christian ethic, you are going back to the religious resources of civilization, because religion provides the sacred frames of reference for eternal renewal that secularism is devoid of and therefore eventually rots. So what you've got in Europe now is mass movements of civilizational populism. It's different than a civilization state. They could eventually create a civilization state, no question. But because so much of Europe does share this common Western civilization that we know, again, Judeo-Christian Christendom or the Byzantine roots and the like, the civilization state will most likely be seen as continent-wide. But even in the most secular parts of Europe, Sweden, Jimmie Åkesson, the Sweden Democrats, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, Marine Le Pen, and of course the state ideology of secularism in France, even in the most secular regions, they are using Christian civilizationalist rhetoric in order to push back precisely against what you're saying. So the fight against populations that are not consistent with European civilization, particularly the Judeo-Christian foundations of European civilization, are being rhetorically reprimanded, identified, and fought back against with the language of Christianity. Christianity is back. So even in the most secular, if anything, sometimes like Marine Le Pen says, it's Christianity that gave us this secular space. It's Christianity and its distinction between the church and the state, or its distinction between heaven and earth, or its distinction between the outer man and the inner man, the inner conscience, whatever, however you want to work it out. She argues, and as does Geert Wilders, that it is Christianity that protects, ironically, our secularism. So they're basically arguing for a Christianized secularism, but it's because they know secularism by itself cannot fight Islam, and it cannot fight non-European culture. So absolutely, this is going to be a very serious battle, no question, in Europe. And but the rhetoric is there. It's been enlivened, and hopefully it's not too late. I don't think it is. Look at what happened over the weekend, for example, in Hungary with the CPAC convention in Budapest. Viktor Orban gave a great speech, as did Geert Wilders, and yeah, what's her name? Eva of Dutch. So anyway, so yeah, yes, it's going to be a battle, but if anything, it is the assault on the continent from this mass migration that's reawakening those Christian sentiments and rhetoric. Thank you, Vlad. Charles Altman, question: with all of the anti-Israel rhetoric on college campuses, could that help this election, or will something else happen to wake people up? Yes. Well, I don't know if it's helping it positively. It's helping it negatively thus far because Biden is now known in the Arab American, Muslim American population. He's now known as Genocide Joe. He's seen as de facto allowing Israel to commit genocide. I'm not saying they are. That's the rhetoric that they're using. I actually talked to it. I had a very long discussion, a total 2-hour discussion with a fellow from Palestine over this issue. It was very, very interesting. Just getting into that world. He had voted for Biden in 2020. He told me under no circumstances will he be voting for him again. And he said, and no one I know in the Palestinian community will be voting for him. Right. So he lost Dearborn, Michigan in the Michigan primary. He won Dearborn with 70% of the votes, the most densely populated region in the country of Muslims. And he lost because of a protest vote. They voted against him. And they promised they're going to do it in the general election. So he needs the Muslim vote, but the Muslim vote is not coming out for him. At the same time, you have a number of Jews who are rightfully very, very upset at the Democrats. They see the Democratic Party as basically modern day anti-Semitism, the seat of modern day anti-Semitism. And which it is because of its cultural Marxism. So when cultural Marxism divides the world up between the oppressed and the oppressor, right, the victim and the victimizer, and then rather than classical Marxism that sees that in class and economic terms, you instead do cultural, the Gramscian, Antonio Gramscian form of identification, where race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality now become the basis for differentiation. Well, you identify the victims, the heroes, as it were, the people who have the moral high ground by their race and ethnicity, and you you identify the oppressors, the bad people, by their race and by their ethnicity and by their religion and so forth. So there's no way around it. There is an inherent racism in modern day leftism. There is going to be an inherent kind of anti-Semitism in modern day leftism. There's nowhere. If Jews find themselves on the oppressor side of the divide, then they're going to be identified as oppressors by virtue of the fact of their Judaism. This is this is the way. I mean, clocks tell time. This is the way cultural Marxism works. It is, if you want to know who belongs to which group, you have to ask the question, what's their race? And the race will determine which group you belong to. It is radically racist in that sense. So we'll see what happens. Rods prepare. What version of the Bible would you recommend reading? Well, I read my New Testament in the original Greek. Actually, I haven't done that in a while. It's been a while since I've read Greek New Testament. I like them all, dude. I mean, I do. I tend to defer to New American Standard. It reads best for me. But I've liked the New International Version, but I just know the later NIVs got kind of creepy with the inclusive language nonsense. So I like NASB. I do like the older NIV because that was my first Bible when I converted back in '94. I went to a Christian bookstore and bought an NIV Bible. So I just have a very soft spot for it. I memorized a lot of scripture, and it's a very good translation, dynamic translation. whereas the New American Standard is a little bit more literal in that sense. I do love the King James version. I can never say Our Father, or I can never say Psalm 23 apart from the King James version. So I just find that to be most, poetic, Shakespearean, Milton-esque. As a matter of fact, Alistair McGrath wrote a wonderful book, how the two major works that defined the modern day English language post 17th century is Shakespeare and the King James Bible. So those would be mine. I don't care for like the message. Those are way too dynamic for me. I don't really care for like those versions. The message. There's a couple of different ones that I always thought were. I always thought, again, because I tend to, and I get it. The original, particularly the New Testament, was the language of the people. It's what's known as Kine Hellenica, Koine Greek. But granted, because it worked on the streets of the Greco-Roman world, doesn't mean it works on the streets today. It's connected to a civilization, and I think there should be a certain levity in the language. So NASB, older NIVs, and certainly King James. Those would be like my top three. Chipshot 2000. Good evening, Dr. Turley. I've been following you now for some time. You inspire me, and your positivity in this crazy world is refreshing. Your podcasts are entertaining and very educational. I feel smarter after listening to you. Thank you, Chipshot. That's very, very kind of you. That's very appreciative. No, you inspire me. I meant that from the bottom of my heart tonight. You really do. You've inspired me beyond words, and you guys are the ones who give me courage in the end. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Tim K, I was listening to Viva Fry's channel, and he was discussing Trump's campaign manager, Susie Wiles. He was concerned that she's a DC establishment swamp creature that's recently been steering Trump in the wrong direction, talking about the jibby jab and taking credit for it and influencing him on VP picks like Tim Scott. Wouldn't Trump want to stay away from things like that and focus on MAGA populism? Thoughts? Yes, definitely. I don't know Susie Wiles too much. I know Viva Fry and Robert Barnes are very, very concerned about her. And if they're concerned, I think we should be concerned because they're right on. They're awesome. I don't think the vaccine is as controversial as we would think. I don't think it's an issue because most people got vaccinated. That's just the bottom line. Most people got vaxxed once. And then I forgot the stats. It was like 80% got the first shot, and then another then it just drops dramatically. Then it's like 40% the second, like 2% the third, something like that. Just absolutely drops dramatically to now where people don't even think about it. So look, most people did it, and it doesn't have the same. I think for us, in the end, it wasn't so much, when all said and done, it wasn't so much the jab. It was the tyranny that went along with it. It was the tyranny that was connected. It was this vicious, horrific tendency to demonize and to dehumanize those who were technically called vaccine hesitant, that wanted nothing to do with the vaccines. They were called by Frankie Schaefer bioterrorists. That's what the vaccine hesitant were called. You'll notice he doesn't say a lot right now. It's kind of quiet of late. But he was calling us bioterrorists, for heaven's sakes. These people are the most dehumanizing language imaginable. And I think that's the issue at hand. I honestly think it's a neutral issue. That's my personal view. I may be wrong. As we go along, we'll find out. I think it's where you may be right, Tim, is it may actually tick off a lot of people who are on the fence between Trump and RFK Jr., and it might knock them over to RFK. But I don't think it's enough to really affect, especially when we're seeing these big numbers. Tim Scott, on the other hand, would make me very, very nervous. I do not like Tim Scott. I find Tim Scott way, way, way too rhino, way, way, way too establishment, or the establishment likes Tim Scott too much. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to be Tim Scott at this point. I would be very, very shocked at that. But yes, you would hope Trump has learned his lesson from the first. Trump believed in his first term that he could make peace with the rhino, that the rhino had learned. And I thought this too, in fairness. I thought this too, that the rhino was going to learn that the new normal was going to be nationalist populism, civilizational populism, and that they could still be rhinos, but they got to be rhinos now in relation to that. They were going to have to learn how to accommodate their soulless politics to this new paradigm. No, they went full Judas on him. They stabbed him in the back. They created their coalition with the Democrats, and like we've been seeing in Congress of late, and that way they got rid of Trump. Now he's coming back. And now the question is, what's he going to do about it? And he better go full animal on. He's got to go full animal on the Democrats, and he's got to terrify the rhinos. If he does that, then I think we'll finally achieve that kind of recalibration we're looking for in 2016. Thank you, Tim. Joan, there is some almost bald fellow on Truth Social giving financial advice and claiming that Biden will quit on June 13th and the DNC will substitute Gavin Newsom, then claims Newsom polls well enough to beat Trump. Where does he get this nonsense? No idea. But I mean, everything you're saying just from an objective perspective based on what's out there is patent nonsense. There's no indication that Biden is dropping out of the race, number one. Number two, Gavin Newsom actually polls worse than Biden. Gavin Newsom isn't that popular in California. Gavin Newsom actually polls worse than Biden. If I recall, it's Kamala, Newsom, and then Biden and Michelle are right around the same point. No one's polling well in the Democratic Party. People don't like them. Remember, we lost 2020 obviously because it was the single most pristine, integral election in human history. That's why we lost. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And we lost 2022 because our voter now is a low propensity voter. The massive amount of the coalition that makes up civilizational populism is a coalition that hates Washington and wouldn't waste a minute on Washington. They don't vote. But were they to vote, they would vote overwhelmingly for us. So that's why we have to make it very easy for them to vote. But we have the data now. Our voting constituency did not come out to vote in 2022. It's not Trump's fault. It's our fault for not learning that we have a new voting constituency. And they used to plague the Democrats. They used to vote Democrat, right? They were the blue collar rural voter in Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Ohio. They tended to vote Democrat, and so the Democrats would get shellacked on midterm elections because they had low propensity blue collar voters, and now those voters are ours. So we are going to have to get them engaged. But no, what I'm seeing I see that as just pure fantasy that he's making up. Proud Canadian, as you ought to be, the great white North. William Wallace stood against tyranny by fighting in battle. When we see our current governments turning towards tyranny, we can't fight wars against them. How does the new William Wallace fight? It's one thing to give your life and the honor in that, but to be thrown into prison like many political prisoners today, it seems that they can take away our freedom. I hear you, proud Canadian. I do. I hear you. But that's where I take my inspiration from people like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, from Václav Benda, Václav Havel in the old Soviet-dominated Czechoslovakia, who used their public platforms in either literature or in poetry. Václav Havel's a poet. Václav Benda was a theologian, very deep public intellectual. They use their platforms to spread ideas that literally fan the flames of liberty in the hearts and minds of Eastern Europeans, and in the case of Solzhenitsyn, Russians. So that's what we have to do. We have to get out there and we have to use our, you are an influencer. If you are on social media, you are an influencer, and you have to use your platform to influence as many people as possible and speak truth, even when you're being intimidated not to. Again, that's what happened to me. I'm totally with you, PC. I was ready to just go back into my classroom and say, I'm done. I am done. I can't fight these guys anymore. But if we come together, if we band together, that's what makes us courageous. That's what makes us dangerous. So use your platform to speak truth, and truth does not need to persuade. Truth is persuasion by definition. All right. The other way in the Christian, tradition, it's preach the gospel always. Leave the success to the Lord. The Lord will take care of the success. You just be faithful and speak truth. And that's what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing, Proud Canadian. Spartacus, how can college students not care about the war in Ukraine, but be concerned about the war in Gaza? It's, I'll be honest with you, it's astroturfed. This is a color revolution. It's Jack Posobiec, and the research he's done. He argues that the center of all the protests are not college students. The center, the heartbeat of all protests aren't college students. They're professional. They're professional protesters. In effect, they're professional revolutionaries, and that can be very effective. The CIA and the State Department have been very effective in bringing down regimes through color revolutions, through these artificial, protests. So I just don't see. I see this as directed in some way, shape, or form, I think ultimately at the Democratic Party to try to change leadership. They don't care if they own DC. They don't care if they lose an election. They actually don't care. They still own it, as we saw in 2016 in the first Trump presidency. They still own it. There's ways that they can exercise tremendous power even when they're not in the majority. I think they're trying to get rid of the last bit of the neo-libs, and then just try to radicalize the Democratic Party as much as possible. That's what I'm thinking now at this point. Ukraine was, for a while, something at the center, but it was too Republican. It had too much Republican support, whereas this one doesn't. Republicans are overwhelmingly on the side of Israel at this point. Rich, Dr. Steve, since this battle for election integrity is a spiritual battle of good versus evil, prayer is our best weapon to combat those who try to steal the 2024 elections like they did in 2020 and 2022. Do you know of any national prayer groups we can join to pray for this election? What a glorious idea. I do not, but I will look for you. And if there is not one, let's start one. Let's do it ourselves. Let's use this platform to start that. Prayer groups. I will look for it, Rich, and I'll let you know next week at our Insiders Club. Awesome. Rebel. Well, hello there, Turley. Dan Rebel here. You have a great day, and no worries. The Lord is with us. The Lord is with us in USA. God bless us. Thank you, Rebel. Absolutely, amen to that. And for those of you who are Orthodox, this is our Holy Week this week. So, awesome! Shout out to all my Orthodox brothers and sisters. Our Easter's this Sunday. So, but WTF do we do? Thank you for sanitizing it. If they rig this election again, what do we need to be prepared for? Another pandemic? I hear you, Jan. I hear you. I don't know what they're going to try to pull. I don't know if it's going to be another pandemic because just so many people are opposed to it right now. They did it, and And it's, I honestly don't think people will follow it. I think there would be mass civil disobedience. I do. I don't know what they've got planned. It's going to be something. The question is whether it's going to be successful. Now, if they do steal this election, what we're already looking at here is it will be a very, very Pyrrhic victory, because the federal government already is experiencing its single lowest legitimacy in the hearts and minds of most Americans. We've never seen this before, but our Gallup polling shows that pretty much all of our public institutions across the board, so our government, our military, our intelligence services, you name it, our media, our businesses, all across the board, they are experiencing a crisis of legitimacy. More Americans have less trust and confidence in our social institutions than ever before. And if you want to see what happens when a crisis of legitimacy reaches critical mass, just look at the Berlin Wall, just look at the Soviet Union. States literally fall apart. So I think it would be a very Pyrrhic victory. And I think DC risks actually losing the last vestige of legitimacy that it has in the hearts and minds of the vast majority of the people. If the vast majority voted in Trump and they cheated and they put in Biden, this could get really serious real quick. And I don't know if people stand for it. So we'll see. So that's one thing we're going to keep an eye on. And in the meantime, I think you're going to start seeing the real rise of the red sanctuary states. Red sanctuary states will have governors and state legislatures that are radically anti-Washington. They will pursue policies of nullification, like we've seen at the southern border with Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, and the Texas National Guard, where they will stop listening to the Supreme Court. They will stop listening to DC. We're already seeing DeSantis do that in Florida. You can pass whatever you want from the Surgeon General. We've got our own Surgeon General. We're not going to listen. And they are going to magnify states' rights to such an extent that I think we'll see about 27 to 30 red states emerge as being the core of the country that preserves our American ideals like an arc in the midst of the degenerating blue states. And we're just going to basically, in effect, build administrative legal walls to keep as much of the blue rot out of red states. That's what's going to happen until we find some way of being able to cut through the electoral rot that's taken over DC. Matt, what do you say to the theory that once the election is held, the Kennedy vote will come home to the Democrat Party? It may. Kennedy, I don't see a lot of it. I've seen some studies that show that it actually, they don't vote, or they split evenly, kind of like Trump, Biden. We'll have to see. We'll know it in the polling. We'll see it in the polling. But I don't see that so much. I think there's tremendous dissatisfaction with the establishment Democratic Party. You're seeing it with the union members in New York City. We're all coming out being pro-Trump en masse. They just don't want anything to do with the Democratic Party, where they feel like they're not welcome. So we'll see, though. Ray, Dr. C, I believe a kind of black swan event would be that a lot of the machines not working on election day, especially in Republican strongholds, like they did in Arizona. Yeah. That's why we've got to have that mail-in ballot initiative really working. We need all the. I should just read what you have, because it's exactly we're simpatico here. We need all the mail-in ballots we can. We need poll watchers everywhere and as much ballot harvesting as we can. But I believe early voting is an imperative, because they can mess with the machines on one day, but can they do it for 2 weeks? Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And we're doing it. So the stage one is voter registration. So you gotta register the voters, and then stage 2 is getting a ballot in their hand, and then making sure that ballot goes to a legitimate counting place. And then stage 3 is exactly what you said: is you volunteer as a poll worker and you audit in real time the vote counting to make sure that that vote gets counted rightly. So, and we're crushing it in voter registration numbers, particularly in Pennsylvania, like what Scott Pressler is doing and Early Vote Action is doing, EVA.org is doing. They're absolutely wonderful. So I'm with you. And we're doing it. That's the good news. It looks like we're doing it. We're doing the first part. We got to make sure we do the second part, which is getting ballots in their hands. Angela, how does my Turley Insider subscription affect subscribing via the app? Are they one and the same? Are they different? They're actually different. You could just go download the app. You'll need to put in different username information into the app. But if you're a Turley Insider's subscription member, nothing changes. The only thing that would change is if you wanted to up your monthly giving, and then our team can do that conversion for you. They can help you with that. Spartacus, can the Dems allow the illegal migrants to vote? That's hard. Believe it or not, that is hard. It is hard to allow illegal migrants to vote in a federal election. It is illegal. You have to be a citizen to vote in a federal election, and not to say they don't get away with it in the urban areas and so forth, but nowhere near at the level they would need to overcome these numbers. Not that what I'm seeing right now. I don't think you have to worry about that too much. That's why they're doing everything they can to try to eventually pass this amnesty so as to bring about a legitimate voting. And then they could do it, like San Francisco, they could put an illegal immigrant or a non-voting citizen, right? What is it? Yeah, non-citizen on their voting commissions. They could do nonsense like that, but that doesn't affect their federal elections. Not at this point. Jules, word was Kristi Noem was chosen as VP pick for Trump. I immediately took to X and Truth telling the kids to not let their dad choose Kristi. Many people on the fence stated that they would not be voting for Trump because of Noem. Kristi bragged in a book that she wrote about wasting her puppy with a bullet. She can't be VP. Jules, I got to be honest with you. I honestly believe that someone leaked that. Maybe she did, for all I know, and she was just politically clueless. But whoever did it, that I agree. I think that was politically fatal. I don't think there's any way that she is going to be his VP after it leaked that she blew away her own dog. That's just, no one's voting for you after that, man. No way. No, I don't think, and I agree with you. There was a time, I was like, she's fine. She's not that bad, but she's a little too rhino for me as well. Too establishment. Bill, I believed early on that Trump would have picked RFK Jr. for vice president, but now I believe RFK Jr. running as an independent in all likelihood would take away votes from Biden. So now I'm unsure who would be the best pick for vice president. Do you see a clear pick for vice president? I don't. To be honest with you, I honestly don't. First of all, I don't think it matters who he picks in the end. He's going to have his support. His support is rock solid. But that said, the only criteria, or I guess in this case, criterion, would be that whoever he picks, that person has to be scarier to the establishment than Trump is. Otherwise, the establishment is going to try to take him out. There's going to be a third impeachment, right? They're going to just try to get rid of him and put the real guy they want in. So that's what made someone like Ron DeSantis very nerve-wracking for me, or Tim Scott. I have a feeling at this point, what I'm reading is it's going to be someone we didn't expect. And I was with you. I thought maybe a Trump Kennedy ticket would be very powerful because it would be a full court press of populists trying to take out the establishment. And you would have two of the most famous names in America teaming up, which would be pretty impressive. Trump, Kennedy. But I'm with you. I don't necessarily see that. But Kennedy has an announcement he's making in a few days. We'll have to see what that's all about. But I don't I don't have any clear pick for a vice president from what I can see from my angle. Art Maker, isn't Thursday a national day of prayer? It may be. I don't know. I will be in church on Thursday for our Holy Thursday. Let's see. Yeah, Thursday, May 2nd. Yep, Art Maker. Right on. Yeah, so make sure you're praying for our country on Thursday, May 2nd. In the Orthodox Church, that's actually our Good Friday. We in the Byzantine Church, the day begins, like in the ancient Hebrew world, the day begins at sundown. So it doesn't begin with sunrise, as it were. It begins at sundown. And so the calendar has, like, Holy Friday, Good Friday, as an evening service at night on Thursday night. Candles, very dark church, very mystical, very, very beautiful. So that's where I'll be on Thursday. So thanks, Art Maker. Kay, do you think President Trump will get justice for the people being held in jail without trials for the fake insurrection? Oh, yes. If President Trump wins, yes, he's already said he'll pardon them. I don't see how he would not. I think he feels a bit of certainly an affinity with them, and I think he will pardon them. And that'll freak out the deep state to no end. It'll freak out the likes of Lindsey Graham and all just these idiots just who are pushing this whole faux narrative that there was some kind of insurrection. The only people who were armed were the guards. It's no insurrection. It's ridiculous. So hopefully, yes, that will happen. Garrett, while people are rallying support but don't see a way to stand against the deep state, do you agree taking our local city council, county, and school boards will be able to make a layer of protection, like how Dems co-opted DAs? We need to do the reverse. Or what else can we do? Yes, definitely. So that's why I spent a lot of time focusing on, like, Shasta, California, where patriots have taken over the local government, county government there. What's going on in Moscow, Idaho. Even NBC News is with Meet the Depressed, as the immortal Rush Limbaugh would call it. They focused on Christchurch and how Christchurch is building a massive Christian civilization in Moscow. Maybe we'll call it the fourth Rome. I don't know if they'll like that, but right, because Moscow's the third Rome, Moscow, Russia. So I focus on that. I focus on the Great Redoubt. So that's Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and then Eastern Washington and Oregon. It's one of the, if you take it as a whole, it's one of the biggest land masses in the country. I think it would be this, second largest state in the country, or possibly the largest. I think Alaska still beats it, but that is the highest concentration of Christian nationalists right now. So yes, the local level is gigantic. You do not want to, in any way, shape, or form, underestimate the power of the local. That's how, in many ways, how communism fell. Communism fell because there were so many local pockets of resistance that eventually it just couldn't, particularly Eastern European communism as well as Russian communism, it just couldn't sustain itself anymore. So absolutely, you bet. Vlad, General Flynn for VP. Oh, there you go. Now you're talking. Now you're talking to someone even more dangerous than Trump. A scene as I would love to see Flynn, though, as, like, defense secretary or something, or joint chiefs of staff, or just something awesome. Yeah, no, General Flynn would be amazing. Dr. Steve, what's your thoughts on Tulsi's VP? I actually like it because I see Tulsi as a very, very strong populist. She gets it. She understands it. She knows the war is against a political aristocracy that has amassed tremendous amount of power and wealth in the hands of very, very few, and seeks to protect that power and wealth through the imposition of an ideology of wokeness that makes us weak and unable to resist, because anyone who does resist is immediately excommunicated. Dissent is not allowed. So she gets that. And if you get that, you're on our team, as far as I'm concerned. We can hash out policy issues till we're blue in the face once we crush permanent Washington. That's the way I see it. So that's why I have no problem with a Trump Kennedy. I have no problem with a Trump Tulsi. I think it's probably better than Trump Gabbard, right? Trump Tulsi, you have a little alliteration. No problem whatsoever. You don't have to be a Republican. You don't have to check all the boxes for proper conservative ideology. You have to be on the side of civilizational populism. So you have to see the divide not as horizontal, left versus right, but rather vertical, people versus political class. She sees that. So I definitely see her as one of us. Jules, Steve, I am an election judge and came across a driver's license left in a Walmart. It was listed federal limitations apply. The guy looked Palestinian or jihad. I have to ask the commissioner about registration of these people. I showed a copy of the license to a judge friend of mine whose campaign I'm working on. He's never seen anything like it. One of the other judges and a wild bunch of Democrats asked me if I racist. I'm concerned about voting. Yes. Okay. Yes. I mean, if it is that level of fraud, yeah, no, definitely. That's very, very concerning. The question, of course, is just how far they can go with it. We'll see. I don't put anything past them. I'm with you. I don't put anything past them at all. All right, there we go. What should we do, guys? Let me talk to our staff. Do we have anybody to thank for some support help tonight? Joining our support levels. We can thank a few. All right, guys. One of the things we've been doing all week, it's just a way of honoring you guys who, when you download the app, you can join one of our levels of support, monthly support to make up for the hit we're taking from YouTube. We had this bell, the Sound of Freedom, made specifically for this week when we rolled out this app. And what we want to do is if you have joined one of those levels of support, I just want to name you publicly. I want to recognize your name and your level of support. I'm going to ring this bell in your honor because you're a freedom fighter standing up to defiance of tech tyranny. So those are our levels of support. Check them out. Bronze, silver, gold, platinum, sapphire, diamond. If I might make a suggestion, our platinum level is, we're going to call it, you get something called Scotch with Steve. That's a special monthly meeting with me online. We get to chat. It's going to be small. It's going to be less than 50 of us. And I don't care if you're bringing your scotch or cigars or soda. It doesn't matter to me. But we're going to have a really awesome night of just chatting and talking about the deepest things imaginable. And I think you're really, really going to love it. Nice exclusive group chat online with me every month. That's for our platinum members of support. All right, so who do we have here, gang? Let's see. We got Robert Z. Robert has joined our bronze platform. Thank you, Robert, so much. Ron H. Ron has joined our gold platform. Thank you, Ron. Very appreciated. David B. He has joined our bronze platform. Thank you, David. It's so kind of you. Thank you. Tom W. joined our silver platform. Thank you, Tom. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. That's so kind of you. Thank you. ACDC 1234. Bronze level. Thank you, ACDC. Love Back in Black. Fan 55. Thank you, Fan 55. Joined our silver platform. Thank you, Fan. Jay Bernard has joined our silver platform. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. Fred H. joined our silver platform. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining those platforms. Man, guys, if you haven't downloaded it yet, it's absolutely free. It's fight.turleytalks.com or just clicking on the link below. We are hoping we're going to get to 10,000 app downloads by the end of the week. It looks like that's exactly what you're going to do for us, but it's a totally free app that you're going to love. And gang, you have you're stepping up to help us during this time of YouTube's demonetization has been absolutely inspiring, and I can't thank you enough. So you are my heroes. What can I tell you? You're my William Wallaces. You are my Samwise Gamgees. You're my encouragers that give me courage to go and be the Patriot Professor that I am. So thank you guys. Thank you so much. Download that free app. Go to fight.turleytalks.com. It's a new platform that can never, ever, ever be canceled no matter what. It's our way of sticking it to the big tech tyrants and telling them a new day is here. Also, when you do download, you're going to get a very special email, and it's going to tell you about our Declaration of Restoration. Yeah, you see it right there. That Declaration of Restoration is our petition to big tech to let them know they no longer control us. We are taking our country back. Over 1,000 of you have signed that Declaration of Restoration. You are absolutely amazing. All right, gang. I love you. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for this nation, and for truth. God bless.